got up this morning and said, you know what? I feel like a really, really good challenge. Like I want to go to church and I want to be challenged beyond anything I ever thought about. Let me see the hands. I got one hand. I got one, actually two. I got two hands. So I was having a coffee with someone who I had met a few months ago at a workshop. She had just left the workforce and she was a superintendent of schools in the area. Very successful, very powerful, and just beautiful soul, beautiful, beautiful. And she was getting ready to leave her occupation and actually start becoming a coach, and so she wanted to have a conversation about that. And in our conversation, she was talking about a time when she was really struggling in her own spiritual journey. Because as she put it, she said, I had a faith that I had known my entire life. She said, and it was comfortable. It's cozy. Felt good, right? But the problem was, it was too comfortable. And I was no longer growing. And then she said, I felt like there was something more, but I was afraid to leave my comfortable box. I was afraid to leave my comfortable box because I wasn't sure what I was going to find. And I sat there and I thought about it and I thought, wow. She was afraid to leave her comfortable box. How many times do we do that in our own spiritual evolution and our own spiritual growth where we just get so comfortable, but we're really not growing? Has anybody ever been there? Here's the next question. Is anybody there right now? Something to think about, right? Something to think about. Because the thing that caught me amazing was here's this woman that when you looked at her life, she had all the signs of success, right? She was successful in her career. She was admired by all of her peers. She had the financial success to go with it. When she told me the rest of her story, she had an amazing marriage. She was a wonderful mother, kids, the whole shot. And yet, inside of all of that, there was this little tapping on the shoulder that was saying, hey, there's something else going on here. There's something more. But because of the comfortable box, she hesitated in terms of looking into what her soul was calling for her to do. Right? That's the title of today's talks, Beyond the Comfortable Box. My hope is to inspire you, those of you that are looking to take your spiritual journey to the next level. And oh yeah, in case you were wondering, there is always, always, always a next level in your own spiritual journey, in your own spiritual evolution. It never stops, because that's not who and what we are. That's not the way God works. That's not the way unfoldment works. It never stops. Some people will call that peeling the onion, right? You're peeling the onion, goes deeper and deeper and deeper. It's just another layer of the onion. So what is this comfortable box, if you will? Wasn't she really talking about her own belief systems? I mean, isn't that really what it boiled down to? Because the truth is, when you look at it and think about it that way, don't we all have our own comfortable boxes? Don't we all? Isn't that the way it works? Our beliefs that we hold near and dear to us? And we all have them. You know, when I sat there and thought about that and was getting ready for the talk, I thought, okay, well, what are some of those comfortable boxes? And I thought, well, clearly, my own spiritual perspective, religious perspective in some cases. And then I started thinking about, well, what are some more? And the things that came to my mind were, well, there's obviously political boxes, right? And then recently, we've got certainly COVID-19 boxes, don't we? Face mask boxes, don't we? Vaccine boxes, don't we? And those are just some of the recent ones. What are some other boxes, comfortable boxes that come to mind when I mention this? Anything? Anybody have any thoughts or ideas? Relationship, marriage boxes? Absolutely. Family? Career? Yep. Yeah, these are great. Culture? Absolutely. Aging? Oh, that's a good one. Didn't think about that one. The whole congregation busts up. Oh boy, are we thinking about aging? Just a little bit? Yeah, yeah. So these comfortable boxes, these belief systems, they're not all bad, actually. They can be helpful at times, right? So you think about it, the comfortable boxes. First of all, don't they kind of make you comfortable? Right? I mean, that's the point of them. These belief systems, they help us, right? Because in some cases, they give us the walls, if you will. They support us. Some people like those walls, the four walls, because they want to know that their walls are there. Some people don't like the walls, but some people do like the walls. So in some respects, those boxes or those belief systems help us be comfortable. They keep us safe. They make us know, okay, here's my boundary, if you will, in terms of who and what I am and everything that I believe in. They also provide a sense of safety, don't they? When you think about it, I mean, they provide us safety. Oh yeah, this feels good. I like this. And then I started thinking about, okay, well, those are the things that are positive about the boxes or the belief systems. But how about those things, the problems with those belief systems or those boxes? And what came to my mind as I started thinking about it, I said, well, first of all, I think that what happens if we become too rigid, we become too strict in a particular ideology, it leaves no room for any growth or for any new understanding whatsoever. None. Why? Well, because I know everything. Why would I need to learn anything else? Because I know it all. And you see that happen in different parts of our society in different things, right? We see that? And as a result of that, what happens is we become stagnant or entrenched in our own beliefs. And then, again, there's no ability for us to expand, even when things are showing up that are saying, hey, we've got a new part of the story you may want to consider because it's adding additional information or new light or a new awarenesses into what is going now that maybe wasn't there yesterday, last year, or 10 years ago, or 40 years ago, or 100 years ago. Here's what I know. I promise you this. If Charles and Myrtle Fillmore were standing right here, right now, and you were to ask them, so, what have you learned since you first started Unity? Do you think they might have a little bit more information that they might want to share with us? I would say yes. And I would even take it back further than that. Even Jesus, I would bet, would have something to add to his story or some more information to share or a different way of looking at it or a higher point of view. So in other words, my experience on a personal spiritual level has always been that as I evolve, I leave myself open. All of a sudden, I'm getting more information and things that I thought about in the way that I thought 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 50 years ago has changed. And I think that's normal, and I think it's healthy for you to do that. And my belief is that even if we talked to the people who have been put in a box, Jesus would be one of them, would say, hey, would you please let go of the box? Please, dear God, let go of the box. Right? So I was watching this documentary about a year ago, and it was a story of Warren Jeffs, who was a Mormon leader out west, and he was convicted in 2006 of child sexual assault, and he's been in jail ever since. And this documentary, honestly, was about the town that he was in charge of. And when he was in charge of the town, understand in that community at that time, he was it. He was the law, he was the religion, and in a sense, he was, and literally everybody in that community made him to be out to be the leader, their chosen one, if you will. That's the way it worked in that society. But the problem was, ever since he was put in jail in 2006, the town was dying. And so what happened was, people had left, families had left, as a result of it because of everything that had happened. But what happened is there was still a handful of people that were left in this town who still believed his story. In other words, no matter what he was convicted of, no matter what they found out to be true, no matter what, the handful of people that stayed in that town still would not believe anything that was said about him, and still to this day believe that he is the chosen one or he was the Messiah. And what this documentary was doing was it was talking about the families that wanted to come back because they were all families. The families wanted to come back and help the families that were still living there. And the families that were still there could not, would not even consider, would not even look at, or even open up the possibility to these people, number one, caring and loving for them, and caring for them enough to come back in and help them, even though the town that they were living in, basically, it was turning into a ghost town. There was barely any electricity left in this town. There was just a fraction of houses that were left. There was only 5 to 10 families that were even existing in the city, and yet they would not change their point of view. And the documentary was this woman that had come together to try to help these two people bridge this gap. And as you watched it, the people, the families that were coming back were so passionate about, oh my God, we can unite back with our families. And yet they just wouldn't do it. The people that were still there still believed in this person, still believed he was the one. And no matter what, and the woman that was going in there wasn't trying to say, well, look, I've got proof. She wasn't doing that at all. She was just trying to say to them, hey, I just want to help you guys come together as a community. I just want to see what I can do to help bridge this gap. And yet, the people that were still there just could not possibly think about something outside of their box, of their belief system. And I don't know what actually happened. This documentary came out a couple of years ago, but it would not surprise me if the town wound up dying, because I didn't see anything changing. Maybe something has happened since. So as I sat there and thought about that example, I also thought about in history, possibly the great examples of people who showed us the way to live outside of their own comfortable box. And of course, we have our buddy Jesus, right? Do you think Jesus lived inside of a comfortable box? I don't think so. The stories of him being 12 years old and teaching in the temples, and also teaching not just people that would come and see him, but also the leaders of the church at the time, and they weren't too happy with what he was saying in any way, shape, or form. And then he continued to teach. And he continued to teach, and he continued to tell people, I and the Father are one. That was radical. What? Are you kidding me? I am one with my divinity. I am one with God. Crazy back then. Crazy to think about that, right? Follow me. In other words, follow my example. Because I am connected to my divinity. You can be connected to your divinity. And they hated him because of it at the time. And then eventually, what did they do? They killed him. They crucified him, right? So Jesus lived outside of his comfortable box his entire life. His message was completely out of his comfortable box, and not his box was very comfortable, but society's comfortable box, right? And that's how he lived his life. As I studied history, all of a sudden the last couple of months I've been just diving into women in history, and I am telling you, there's something about you ladies, you just are amazing. And unfortunately, a lot of the history of the really super powerful women have been removed from our history in some cases, and we just don't know enough about them. But one of the stories we're somewhat familiar with, but I thought I'd do a little bit more of a deep dive, Joan of Arc. Joan of Arc. What do we know about Joan of Arc? The only thing I knew about Joan of Arc is she was burned at the stake, right? Isn't that generally what everybody knows about Joan of Arc? Okay. No. There's way more to Joan of Arc than her being burned at the stake. She was 13 years old in 1412. She was born in 1412, okay? So she's born in 1412. I just want you to imagine, you think women are oppressed now? You think they were oppressed back in the early 1900s? You think they were oppressed back then? Imagine, we're going back to 1400. Okay, so what is the role of women back in 1400? Nothing. They're nothing, right? Your property. When she was 13, she was sitting in a garden and she had a vision. And what she said is she identified as St. Michael, St. Catherine, and St. Margaret all came to her, and here's what they told her. This just blows my mind. She's 13 years old, this little girl, and she has a vision, and she says, go drive out the English. Drive out the English. Why? France was in a war, and by the way, not doing very well at the time. In fact, losing multiple battles and getting basically run over by the English. She has a vision when she's 13 years old that says, you got to drive, you, Joan, have to go out and drive out the English. So what happens? She goes, well, that's interesting. But that vision keeps swirling around in the back of her mind. It takes her 3 years, so now she's 16 years old. 16. I got, my daughters are much older than that, and I'm just going back to when they were 16. I'm thinking about when I was 16 years old. I got to do what? She's 16 years old. And she asks a relative to take her to a nearby town so she could actually speak to King Charles in the French royal court. So what happens? She goes up to these people and says, hey, I got a message for the king. So what do you think happens? Who are you? Are you crazy? So they start laughing at her. She's not deterred. She's not. So what happens is a few months later, she goes up to two soldiers and she says, listen. She goes, I have to talk to the king. I got to be by his side. There will be no help for the kingdom if not from me. That's what she tells these two people. And she goes, although I would rather have remained spinning wool at my mother's side, yet I must do this thing, for my Lord wills that I do it. Whew. Wow. Incredible. And so she finally gets these two soldiers to basically try to get her to see the king. It's not easy because she's got to go with them, and guess what they've got to go through to get to the king? War, battles. She's with them. She's with them, doing everything that all the soldiers are doing. She's doing it. She's 16 years old. Finally, King Charles agrees to meet with her when she was 17. She tells him that she's been sent by God to save France. King Charles probably looks at her and goes, yeah, right. But at that point in time, the truth is, he had nothing to lose because no matter what he did, it wasn't working. It was not working in any way, shape, or form. He figures, well, she says she's sent to God. She made it all the way to see me. What do I got to lose? All right, what do you got, kid? Guess what? She starts telling him what to do. Guess what? They start winning. They start winning these battles. They start winning these wars with her by his side out in the battlefield, and she is out there doing what she does. Can you imagine a 17-year-old girl out there in the battles with the soldiers doing what she is doing? So what happens? They start winning, and they're winning, and they're winning, and they're winning. And then finally, the English say, we got to take a break. Truce, please stop. We're done. We're done, right? Her reputation and her name had got out there, and she was well known to the English. In fact, the English actually thought she was possessed, that she was the devil. After all, how could a 17-year-old girl be doing what she's doing to us? And so what happens is they're taking a break, and during that break, they wound up basically coming after her. And in May of 1430, she's 18 years old now at this point in time, she was ambushed and captured by the English, is what happens. And although King Charles tried to rescue her several times, it just never worked. He wasn't able to do it. And then what happens is she's put on trial as a witch for heresy. But here's the thing. They considered her illiterate, by the way. She was considered to be illiterate prior to that. So when she came into court, what they tried to do is they tried all these technical, tactical things within the trial to get her convicted, to have her do something stupid or say something that would get her convicted. But guess what? Didn't work. Didn't work. So they're sitting there going, oh my God, what are we going to do? What do we have to do about this? And so what they did was they came up with something. Guess what they convicted her of? It's going to blow your mind. Cross-dressing. She was convicted of cross-dressing because when she was in battle, she was wearing armor in order to protect herself like every other man out there was doing. They convicted her of cross-dressing. That's what she was convicted of. And then, of course, she was burned at the stake. Eyewitnesses described the scene of the execution on May 30th, 1431. She was tied to a tall pillar. She asked two of the clergy to hold the crucifix before her. She was so committed to her vision and to her God that even though she was about to be burned, she wanted to see the cross. An English soldier also constructed a small cross to be in front of her so she could see it. So she had 3 crosses in front of her as she burned on the stake. After she died, the English raked back the coals to expose her charred body so that no one could claim she escaped alive. And you know what they did? They were so freaked out about her that they burned her body 2 more times. 2 more times to reduce it to ashes and prevent any collection of relics. They wanted nothing left of her remains. Nothing. And they threw her remains in the Seine River in France. The executioner later stated that he greatly feared being damned, for he had burned a holy woman. In other words, he knew that they screwed up. He knew it. He knew it. So later on in history, what actually happened is they retried her. Her mother was so upset about everything that had happened that they actually retried her, and when they did, they found out what they did. They found out the shenanigans they played in order to convict her, and they actually overturned it in history, and then now she's considered the saint that she's considered. That story blows my mind to think about. This young girl, this young woman has this vision. Do you think Joan of Arc was comfortable in her box? I sit there and I think about Jesus and Joan, and there's so many other examples of people going outside of their box who live their entire lives not being comfortable in any way, shape, or form. But in order to live there, what did they have to do? They had to be willing to look at what was considered normal and consider other possibilities that may exist. In other words, they're willing to look at things another way, consider another thought, believe a different situation may be possible. Maybe they were open and they challenged not only their own belief system, but the system, the belief systems of society at large. They were willing to do it. And they looked at it in this other way, and as a result of it, they changed history. They both changed history, huge ways, just by choosing not to be comfortable in their box. By looking at other possibilities. You know, as we talk about this idea of considering looking outside of the boxes, this has been discussed in behavioral science and evolutionary theory for years. And I want to talk about a theory that's called the adjacent possibilities. When I was going through the classes I had to take for the ministerial program, as we did a deep dive into metaphysics, Paul Hasselbeck talked about this idea that had been brought up called the adjacent possibilities. What is the adjacent possibilities? It was coined by a theoretical biologist, Stuart Kaufman, in 2002. The adjacent possibility refers to the change that's available to you, in other words, adjacent or next door to you, versus the change that's not. So in other words, it's this wiggle room, this growth room, this stretch room where we can say to ourselves, you know what, maybe I could consider some other things that are fairly close to what I believe, but I'm not going to push it too far, because then I'm going from my belief system to a possibility of maybe being a little bit different to all of a sudden going, ain't no way. I can't go that far. I can't push it that far. Because what happens in this thought or this theory is that when a person stretches and assimilates the adjacent possible, so in other words, when they go, here's my belief system, I'm willing to move over here a little bit and play with it, but if you push me too far, what happens is, what they do is they come all the way back and they get entrenched in their original belief system. And that's what happens, right? Anything beyond this adjacent possible, beyond wiggle room, no matter what, is going to challenge you. It's going to make you actually uncomfortable. I can relate to this story. And before I get into the story, as a side note, this is not me trying to talk you into whether you believe or don't believe in reincarnation. That is not why I'm bringing up the story. I'm just going to share something with you, a story that happened to me on my own spiritual journey, my own spiritual path. As many of you know, when I was younger, I grew up in fundamental Christianity. I didn't even know what the word reincarnation meant. No clue. No idea it even existed. Not at all. And then all of a sudden, when I learned about it, of course, I'm not going to believe it. Why would I believe it? It doesn't say anything in the Bible about it, so there's nothing there. And then what happened was I read the autobiography of Edgar Cayce, There Is a River. It's a beautiful story. It's his story about how he was this fundamental Christian, and yet he could be put into a state where all of a sudden he could get information that healed thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of people back in the early 1900s. He healed thousands and thousands of people. Well, during those readings or those sessions, what happened was some information started to come through about reincarnation, and it kept coming up over and over and over again. And when he would come out of the trance, he would look at it, and obviously, guess what? Conflict. Fundamental Christian, no reincarnation. This thing that's just helped me save thousands and thousands and thousands of lives is saying there might be something called reincarnation. And so guess what happened with Cayce? He went from here, his belief system, and he went into the adjacent possible, which meant he was willing to be stretched a little bit in his own belief system to where reincarnation wouldn't be something where the door would actually be shut. It would be actually something he could take into consideration. And then eventually he started to believe in it. So I read that, and it was like, well, that's interesting. And then at the same time, what happened was I was into unity at this point in time. And I read James Dillard Freeman's book about The Case for Reincarnation, is the name of the book. And in it, from a historical perspective, Freeman talks about the history of reincarnation and. I'm not going to tell you what's in that book, but what I'm going to say is from a historical perspective, he talks about specifically where it has intentionally been taken out of the different religious books that have happened over the history of time. It was at that point in time, those two things, in my own experience with the adjacent possibility, that what happened is I went from my belief system, no reincarnation. I stepped over here and thought, In other words, it didn't freak me out. It didn't scare me. It didn't push me back here. It just made me go, And as I stood in the adjacent possible for longer and longer, then all of a sudden it just kind of clicked and it made sense to me. So again, I'm using that example not to talk anybody into believing or not believing in reincarnation. That's not why I'm sharing that story, but I wanted to give you an example. Right? So, why am I telling you a story about going beyond your comfortable boxes? Why are we talking about that this morning? In my own spiritual journey, what happened with me at times was that I just felt like there was something more. You know, I grew up in this box, this tight box called fundamental Christianity, and as I started to turn into a teenager, it wasn't just the rebellion part of me of being a teenager. There was also something telling me, like, look, I read the entire Bible, and I'm not getting it, because it's saying this here, it's saying this over there. I'm confused, and I kept feeling like there was more, there was more, there was more. And then finally, I've shared the story with many of you that I finally said to God, you know what, God? I want to know you directly. I'm done with the books. I want to have a direct experience. I want you to teach me about you, not through a man or a book or through anything else like that. I want to have the direct experience. And in my opinion, it was probably the most powerful prayer I ever said in my life. Because guess what? All of the restrictions, all of the beliefs, all of the fabricated lies that we've been fed and told throughout the history of mankind were all of a sudden removed. And then I could really start to dive into some really, really fun things. Like, unity. In case you haven't figured out yet, unity is not a box. If you need a box for your own spiritual growth and development, hey, spoiler alert, you are in the wrong place. You're in the wrong place. Do we have some of the basics? Of course we do. We love God. We love Jesus. We love what they represented. We believe in them wholeheartedly. I have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ, always have, for a long, long time. My understanding of what he was saying has changed radically, but not his love. Not what he came down here to teach us. Not what he came down here to show us. That has not changed, nor will it ever change. Not the relationship with God. That will never change, ever, no matter what, right? So what I've observed over the last couple of years is that the information that's coming through is not exactly in the box. And what I'm going to tell everybody in this room is that if you're open to experiencing something out of the box, it's there. It's there. You just have to open yourself up a little bit. If you'll actually say a little prayer that says, hey, if there's something outside of this box I'm living in, please show it to me. I promise you, your world is going to be flipped upside down because there's so much information that's coming through in non-traditional ways for people that really are open to taking their own spiritual growth and development to another level. Things that are mind-blowing to me. And the more I keep following the trail, so to speak, the more doors open up to me, the more stuff I've seen, and the more stuff I'm learning. So, it's at this point of the talk where I'm going to pause for a moment and do something rather crazy. And I'm going to ask by vote, we're going to have a little bit of a democratic process here. How many people this morning might be interested in doing something a little bit outside the box by a show of hands? How many people? Okay. Guess what? You won, the people that want to do it. For those of you that don't, it's okay. I promise nothing, you won't hurt yourself. I promise. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to share something that came through some different channels of information, if you will, a couple of days ago that I thought was absolutely beautiful, and I wanted to share it with you this morning. So what we're going to do is we're going to dim the lights. It doesn't matter if you want to listen to this and close your eyes, you can, you don't have to. But I'm going to have the guys close the lights, and I'm just going to read this thing that came through and share that with you. Free your world and yourselves from the tyranny of hate, despair, and anger. Turn to one another in an air of acceptance, for each of you is entirely unique and individual, yet part of the collective whole. We understand the pain and suffering in the world comes from ignorance and from a lack of light. You have forgotten your sacred ties to the earth, to heaven, and to each other. Release your fears. Let the dreams of your childhood come back into your adult memory and shake yourselves loose from the need to compete against one another. There is a profound misalignment in your world stemming from a deep loss of soul memory of the sacred beginning of the universe. You have become ignorant of your own beginnings, and your true history has been hidden from you. Many of you see yourselves as being apart from Source, lost like a stray cat or dog or a neglected child or elder. You have never been separated, for the light is within you and within the sacred chamber of your heart. There you are one with the Creator, with Source, with Mother, Father, God. Your race once descended from the light, and to the light it shall return. The path of the return has commenced. The event of which so many speak is happening now as more and more individuals decide to change their lives and to seek the sacred within. And as that heart opens, they suddenly can see their neighbors and co-workers with new eyes, their new inner eyes, the singular eye of wisdom and Christ consciousness. The light illuminates and brings with it divine wisdom. This wisdom has always existed, but has remained hidden during the dark ages after the fall. We encourage you to seek out the wisdom that exists in the teachings of the indigenous people of the earth. They have held the secrets close to their hearts, knowing that the wisdom would be needed by all of the people, even as it appeared that the world was dying. To all, we say that the world you have known is dying. The world that many of you grew up into and became conditioned to is now in the process of coming apart. Dark forces resist ever-increasing pressure from the light and seek to ensnare the multitudes in darkness and ignorance once again. So their control of the reins of the government and commerce cannot be loosened. It is up to each individual to make the choice whether or not they wish to be free or whether or not they wish to change their lives and to take the next step. Your process of transmutation takes on the form of a spiritual journey where you are divested from your old beliefs for the sake of your healing, your relief, and pass through many transformations as the layers of old, sticky energy are removed and released from your energy field. You are undergoing a complete clearing of your individual, family, and cultural karmic patterns so that humanity will not have to relive their lives in repetitive, negative cycle of suffering and misery. You are breaking free from the karmic wheel. In a time long lost in the midst of time, humanity lived upon this planet in harmony and grace and paradoxical setting in the midst of the Pacific Ocean. Some of you remember this land as Lemuria or Mu. Once your consciousness was housed within bodies of light bodies, yet as the planet descended into the frequency and the vibration slowed down, your bodies took on physical form, becoming heavy and dense. What you interpret as physical matter is simply vibration slowed down to where it can be seen and felt by physical senses. In truth, your world is made up of waves of light and sound dancing in different frequencies. As a vibration slows, the matter becomes dense. As a vibration increases, form becomes light, sound can be seen as color, and colors emit sound. As your consciousness expands as to the higher frequency ranges, you will begin to experience the underlying music of the spheres, the songs that the planets and stars sing to each other, just like your own cells sing to each other in a frequency that is beyond your current physical ability to hear. Once your bodies are freed from the old programming, you will begin to ascend into a higher frequency until your physical body is transformed into a magnificent body of light. That is what is taking place for many at this time. These are way showers, and they are reliving the sacred path of initiation that once was hidden from the multitudes. The path is challenging, but we bid you remember that everything you do is for the sake and for all of humanity. Keep your focus on your desire to know God, to embrace God, to allow God's angels to sing to you, to guide you, to enfold you within their grace. Your desire to know and feel oneness will bring you safety to any challenge that you may face. Know that you carry a great power, wisdom, and grace within. In truth, you are all human angels, long ago descended into this world, which is a story that will be told elsewhere. You do not fall out of the malice or deceit or rebellion, but out of the desire to experience the deepest levels of creation, that of the lower worlds of the third dimension. All life has intelligence and is alive. Allow the elementals to share with you the wisdom they have learned. Reflect on the sacredness of the smallest creature of wonder and creation, which has been brought forward for your enjoyment. Life can once again become harmonious and gracious, free from fear. But first, allow the purging fires to burn away the impurities of misunderstanding and open your inner eyes so that you might look upon the world and see that there is truth, that in truth there is no bad or good, there is only consciousness. It is how you choose to judge someone or some experiences that ensures that you will continue to draw the same energy to yourself. Let go of the need to judge and instead view the world with neutral eyes, filled with compassion. Love what you experience and observe to teach you the deep wisdom of spirit for how matter is merely animated light. Release yourself from self-judgment. If you feel like you failed, allow yourself the option of trying over. The angels do not judge you because they do not have egos. The ego mind, or left side of the brain, has reigned over this last age, but the unification of the two halves has commenced even as long deactivated DNA on your cellular structure is lighting up in response to the incoming waves of light emerging from the center of the universe. With the two hemispheres of the brain becoming one, you will contain unity consciousness. It is what you are within, deeply hidden within your own crystalline DNA. You are in the process of leaving behind the caterpillar stage of your evolution and becoming once again angelic humans capable of so much more than what you can imagine today. As we look upon each of you, we see your past, now, and future. For us, it exists in the now. Each of you has a choice whether or not to go forward into the light or to retreat and remain in darkness. We love you no matter what choices you make and will remain as your guides for those who are willing to explore beyond the comfortable boxes into which you have been coaxed and conditioned by well-meaning but ignorant adults and mentors and passed down through the annals of time. The journey is an individual one at first, but will soon expand and become a collective experience as more and more individuals awaken to the startling truth that they are a fractal portion of God, a light being having a human experience. We greet you in the new dawn of humanity. We honor you for your willingness to explore the lower levels of creation and welcome you to the stars. So we consider going beyond our comfortable boxes. And so my hope and prayer is you walk through those doors today and walk out into the world. Maybe there's a minute or two where you can take and ask yourself, well, what are my comfortable boxes? Where am I possibly getting stuck? Are you willing to possibly step outside of it? Are you willing to do what Jesus did, what Joan of Arc did, what the Fillmores did, and so many that have come before us, to step out of those comfortable boxes? And you know what? It doesn't matter if you do or if you don't. There's no judgment, none, zero, coming from me anyways. But all I'm saying is if you're really wanting something deeper, it's there. It's just a matter of you deciding to open yourself up to these possibilities, asking for those possibilities to be shown to you. Because in my own experience, that's what it took in order for these doors to start to be open. And those doors are there. It's just a matter of taking time to explore and to see what shows up for you. And don't put a box on the way that that should show up. So don't think it's necessarily going to come to you in the form of a book, although it may, or coming and hear me talk, it may, or a song that happens on the radio, it may, or a conversation with your partner, your spouse, right? You never know. There's no limits on the way God can reach out to you when you're open to it. So I leave you with the thought of stepping outside of your comfortable boxes. My belief is that you are all here for a very specific reason, and that is to shine your light. You all are. We all do it differently. I say this all the time to you folks. You all are doing absolutely amazing work. It is not easy being down here right now. It is not. There's a lot of stuff going on, and I know sometimes we get freaked out about it. How could you not? How could you not? But what I'm sharing with you is we're here for a very specific reason. There is so much more. But I just want you to know that you're brilliant, you are loved, you matter, you're important, each and every one of you, and the way that you show up, that we're all needed, not only individually but collectively as well. And I hope to God that you never forget that, ever, ever, ever. You matter. You're important. You're loved. Keep shining, folks. You're doing an amazing job. God bless.